Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We're joined now by Mohammed Ibn Chambers, who is a former ECOWAS, he was in charge of ECOWAS. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Pleasure.
And speaking about, yes, the focus is this Energy, Environment and Investment Forum. Sustainable energy, the key to Africa's world integration is the theme here. But looking at it from Africa's perspective, yes, power is central to development, but people ask themselves, but when you talk about alternative sources of energy, where do we rank in the scheme of things? Is it time for us to talk about it now?
No question. The centrality of energy, of power, for driving Africa's growth even to higher levels cannot be denied. I mean, we are, on the whole, on the right trajectory. And for me, it is really about changing the narrative of our continent. The dominant narrative is one of crisis and all the challenges we face, which is true. But the other side of the coin is that this is a continent which is growing at, this year projected to grow at least 5.5% on average. And 15 of African countries are growing at rates of between 7 and 10%, including Nigeria and River State. So this needs to be known. We need, of course, to maintain consistency of this growth, and one way that we can do that is to improve the energy supplies, so that our economy can perform even stronger. And here there needs to be a mix of energy sources, not just thermal, but also the huge hydro potential that we have, the solar potential that is enormous, even biofuels and other sources all need to be tapped. In some countries, maybe even wind. So we need to do more research into renewables and approach this from a very pragmatic basis of mixing all the sources of energy.
Do you think, or don't you think that the challenge of policy implementation in Africa across board will pose an impediment to our achieving all of this?
That's a fundamental problem. We know that energy is important. And if you go through most countries, states, we do have policies. We have energy policies, we even have renewable energy policies. Being consistent and implementing these and following through is our challenge. And that is where we absolutely must improve. For instance, in West Africa, even now have a regional center for renewable energy, which came about when I was president of ECOWAS, and with the support of one of the distinguished invited guests who participated in this seminar, the Prime Minister then of Spain, Jose Luis Zapatero, who came to partner with West Africa. And we do have a regional center for renewable energy and energy efficiency in Cape Verde. So all these are assets that we need to tap on and try to harness to improve this, different sources of energy that can contribute to the increasing growth of our economies.
The question that many would ask is, we've had this issue of policy inconsistency, and then we've had talk shops on moving forward and implementing policies. And we have more of these seminars and workshops going on different parts of the continent and the sub-region at that. So how do we get to that point where we stop the talking and begin to move? How do we move forward?
I think this is where I think the role of private sector really comes to play also. Because private sector should also appreciate that it's good for business if, in fact, they get involved, especially in a sector such as energy. You cannot lose, whether you're providing it to homes or settling it to industry. It is a source of wealth creation also. And I think that the kinds of reforms and policies that have been put in place now to empower the private sector is a step in the right direction. So we get people, more and more entrepreneurs, to see that they can engage in supplying energy or distributing energy for that matter, make money for their companies, but at the same time provide a valuable service. I think that may really be the way to go.
Yesterday we did hear you talk about changing the narrative, and there seemed to be like a little, like a challenge from Ruben, who was saying that it's very difficult to change what the dominant narrative is. You talked about growth. One of the challenges that Nigeria, maybe West Africa, has faced is translating this growth into employment and development for citizenry. How would you say that governments across board are tackling that particular challenge?
Yes, it's important to have growth, but most people will agree these days that growth must also be inclusive. And inclusive, is particularly in two ways. Inclusive in making sure that women are part of this growth, that indeed they are central to this growth, and also that youth, and this is especially the case in Africa today, where we have a very youthful population. So a number of things need to be done. Of course, one way is through training, education and training, providing skills for youth, relevant skills, job-creating skills, more technical and vocational training. But at the same time, we also need to look at certain sectors of our economy which we have ignored. And agriculture is one such sector which can generate tremendous number of growth. But there, if we're going to tailor it to the youth, we also have to make it attractive. We have to modernize it. We have to bring in more technologies and more high-yielding inputs so that when youth get into agriculture, they will appreciate that they can really make a good living out of the land. And of course, the whole issue there of value addition, beneficiation. We cannot continue to be just producers of raw materials. We need more and more to add value to our raw materials. And in that value chain, of the value addition, you will find so many sectors that young people can be more interested in, and that we need to direct and channel also the energies of young people.
Well, thankfully, these are areas that Nigeria is looking at as a whole. We've had many conferences on that, on agriculture, on employment, even adding value to looking at agriculture as a business. But you do know that we're facing a new challenge. Something you also mentioned yesterday: security. How do you think that this is impacting on the positives that we are experiencing as well?
Actually, the two are linked. Peace and security and development. And one way of tackling the problem in a more comprehensive way is also creating these opportunities for livelihood, for jobs, for alternatives to going the path of violence and following radical ideologies. So the two should really go hand in hand. And as you have said, there are some very interesting reforms on the agricultural front, particularly in Nigeria and in many other African countries. In fact, the recently concluded Africa Union Summit was devoted to agriculture, focusing on this sector, challenging African countries to put in the investments that are required there. 20 years ago, African countries agreed to invest a minimum of 10% of budget into agriculture. When this summit met in Malabo only last week, the issue was to review and see how many countries are doing that. And the good news is that some countries are, in fact, many countries are. And the challenge is for more and more countries to appreciate the importance of agriculture and to put in the investments that are required to boost this sector, which will not only ensure that we are food self-sufficient, but also can produce the raw materials that we can add value to. And in all of that process, generate employment, particularly for women and youth.
The youth play a key role in this, but I've listened to so many civil society groups across Africa, pressure groups, even some of them in government positions, and they all seem to be united on the fact that when it comes to youth matters, in government positions, they're the fewest in those positions, but they are largest. They're the ones who are in most of the schools doing a lot of the learning. But when it comes to giving them that responsibility, they are relegated to the background. What do you think is responsible for this, and how do we overcome it?
Well, I mean, our societies in many ways are traditional. So when we're in transition, we're changing. I think we're beginning to appreciate more and more the value of empowering women, the value of empowering youth. And I think as that recognition comes to fore, we will see that indeed we actually allow youth and women to express their full potentialities. In that regard, I mean, there is also a generational change. I mean, across the continent, if you look at the profile of leaders, you will see that it is coming down. I mean, it's not only in the US or in the UK where you have heads of state, in their 40s and early 50s. In Africa, more and more of that is happening. But as with any transition, it probably, takes longer than we all want to see. But it's a trend in the right direction. This is a very beautiful continent. Nigeria is a very beautiful country, and that is a plus. I mean, for me, it shows that there's a lot of dynamism and a lot of energy that we can harness and tap to very positive ends.
That's all we had to live with today. Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, former president of ECOWAS, speaking to us today about energy, environment, and investment forum coming to you live from Port Harcourt. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Yes, and that's where we draw the curtains as well today on Sunrise Daily. We thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain.
Oh, thank you. I'm Malbeth Ogun.
And I'm Neil Tagwe. Thank you.